Rikishi, Aaron Clark. In the 212, you got Silvio Samuel making his comeback. I don't think he's competed at the Olympia since the early 2000s. I think he was a top 10 placer back then, but he's doing the 212 now. And based on the call-outs that I saw earlier, we didn't make it up to prejudging, but I was looking at some of the photos from prejudging. It looked like he was up there in the center of the 212 call-outs. So I guess he's going to be doing pretty well. And in the open call-outs, you had Steve Kuclo in the middle, Luke Sando in the middle, and a guy named Charles Griffin that they moved into the middle. So I didn't even have that guy in my prediction video, but apparently he's doing pretty well. So we're going to try to get you guys some footage from the show, try to vlog a little bit of whatever behind-the-scenes stuff that we can get. I did sponsor this show, so you're going to see my logo up on the stage. So I don't know what kind of behind-the-scenes stuff we can get with these VIP passes that I got, and with the fact that I'm sponsoring the show. But hopefully we'll be able to do something, or go backstage, or get to meet some of these pros, or just something that regular people don't get to do. We'll see what we can get for you guys. So we're about 20 minutes away now, so we'll be pulling up soon, and we'll start recording the show for you guys. Yeah, anything to say, Zach?
Got nothing.
Heat
Day looked pretty good. I thought from prejudging it looked like Steve Kuclo, Heat Day, that Charles Griffith, and then who was the other one? Is that it?
Luke Sanders.
Oh, yeah, Luke Sando. Yeah, I thought Heat Day looked really good. That's really about all I got.
So this is my buddy Zach, by the way. I really appreciate him coming out because he's 1 week out from his bodybuilding show, the Natural Mr. Cincinnati. You're going to be seeing a lot of footage of that on the channel next week as well. So this is going to be the first vlog that you see for 2018.
That's why I look so small.
Yeah. And the second vlog will be prepping him for the Natural Cincinnati, and then footage of the Natural Cincinnati. And I'm also sponsoring that show as well, so that'll be cool for you guys to see. If you guys haven't seen the behind-the-scenes side of a natural bodybuilding show, we'll try to show you guys some of the tanning, get a nice clickbait thumbnail of me putting the tan on them, so that should be fun. That'll do it. All right, guys, so I just got back from the 2018 Indy Pro in Indianapolis, Indiana, so I wanted to make a recap video kind of going over the placings here. But first I wanted to thank Dave Bowers for putting on the show. The show was amazing. It was very well run. The venue was absolutely beautiful. So this is the first year ever that they've done the Indy Pro. It's a brand new pro show on the pro circuit. So I wanted to go to it. It was close by. I sponsored the show. As I'm sure you guys will see in some of the videos and pictures in this video, you can see my logo off to the side on the left-hand side of the stage. So I thought, hey, it's a brand new pro show. Let's sponsor it, give it some coverage, and help it kind of get off the ground here. So I'm glad I sponsored it. I'm glad I went because it was a great show. So in the men's open, you had Steve Kuclo winning. You had Charles Griffin in second. You had Luke Sando in third. You had Ian Villiers in fourth. Justin Rodriguez in fifth. And Roman Fritz in sixth place. So these placings are pretty much what I expected and pretty much what I predicted, with the exception of a couple guys. So one of the guys that kind of came out of nowhere for me was Charles Griffin, the guy that took second. And I got to say, man, this is a guy that we should be looking out for in the future because this guy looked amazing. His conditioning was on point. He has a very impressive physique, very impressive structure. His biceps specifically, he's got a very impressive front double bicep pose. The dude just looked great all around, and honestly, this is a guy that I didn't really see coming as a number 2 guy. So, I want to give him props in this video because I didn't really have him in my predictions. He kind of came out of nowhere, surprised me, surprised a lot of people. This guy looked really, really good. Definitely deserved that second place spot. In fact, Steve Kuclo is my boy. I think he's got a great physique. There were some points when they were comparing the two of them, I was getting a little bit worried for Steve Kuclo because Charles Griffin looked that good to me. I thought he was very impressive, but overall, I felt that Steve Kuclo deserved the win. So you had Luke Sando in third place, and I predicted that he would be in second. Really the main problem for Luke Sando was his conditioning. Again, both of the top 2 guys had really good conditioning. Steve Kuclo and Charles Griffin were both shredded to the bone. And the thing that I saw with Luke Sando is he looked pretty good from the front. A lot of the photos of the front, he looks very massive. He looks, pretty lean. But when he turned around, you could definitely see that conditioning was a problem. Now, I'm a big fan of Luke Sando as well. Again, I've said this many times. I think he has a physique that's very reminiscent of Dorian Yates. He's got posing that's very reminiscent of Dorian Yates. And he's got all the size to be, a top contender at the Arnold Classic, a top contender at the Mr. Olympia. But the conditioning is the problem. So to be honest with you guys, when Luke Sando turned around and started hitting poses from the back, I became worried that he might not be in the top 6 because personally, I was sitting maybe 3 or 4 rows from the front row. We had very good seats. And personally, when he turned around from the back and he started posing, I mean, there were areas on his body that were just actually jiggling because there was either water or fat there. And, just the conditioning from the back, it just wasn't good at this show. I think he looked, much better in Australia. And I think he could have been a little bit harder and drier, actually a lot harder and drier at this show. And had he done that, he probably would have been a contender for the top spot. So Ian Veer, this is another guy that kind of surprised me here, placing 4th. But I got to say, he had a pretty impressive physique as well. Conditioning was on point. He's got really great shape, really great size. He's got a really good V-taper, really small waist. This is another very impressive guy that I think we should be looking out for in the future. In number 5, we had Justin Luis Rodriguez. This is another guy I had in my predictions as a top 6 guy. This was a guy that impressed me at the New York Pro. I believe he got 4th place back at the New York Pro. And he looked very impressive here as well. And in that 6th place spot, we have another guy that I said in my prediction video might be top 6. And that is Roman Fritz. So Roman Fritz looked very impressive as well. He's a little bit smaller than some of the other guys, but he's got a very classic physique, very aesthetic physique, and just very good lines overall. If he had a little bit more size, I think he would be a much bigger threat to these guys. He is certainly noticeably smaller than them, in my opinion. But I think his lines and aesthetics are so good, combined with his conditioning, that would land him in the top 6 spot at this show. So next we have the 212 division. So the 212 was actually very interesting to watch. There are some cool things that happened there. So in first place, you have Charles the Tank Dixon. Now, I predicted that as well in my prediction video. Based on his 2nd place finish at the Arnold Classic, I thought for sure, this was a show he was going to come in and win, and I was correct in that regard. Number 2, you got a guy that kind of took me by surprise. Jacob Wilson would take 2nd place. This was a guy, he really wasn't even on my radar at all in this 212 division. And he came in, I think the reason he placed 2nd was his conditioning was so damn good. Probably one of the hardest guys on stage that night. He looked very, very impressive from a conditioning standpoint. Structure standpoint as well. Very good V-taper, very small waist. Overall, very impressive bodybuilder in Jacob Wilson. But I think the main story of the 212 division is Silvio Samuel making his comeback and placing 3rd here. So when I read the list the first time, I saw Silvio Samuel's name on the list, but I thought for sure it couldn't be the same Silvio Samuel. I'm sure there's another 212 guy named Silvio Samuel that wasn't the same Silvio Samuel that we saw, competing in the Olympia years ago. Now, back in 2007, 2008, Silvio Samuel was a top 10 finisher at the Mr. Olympia, placing 7th both of those years. And in 2009, he would tie for 12th place at the 2009 Olympia. Now, after that, he would take a fairly long hiatus from the sport of bodybuilding. I believe the cause was he spent some time in prison. He was kind of trying to refocus his life a little bit. So yesterday actually, at the age of 42, he would come back almost a full decade later after his last competition and take 3rd at this Indy Pro show in the 212 division. And I got to say, I think you could have made an argument for him getting 2nd. His posing routine was great. I really enjoyed his posing routine. He had great kind of classical posing. His physique looked great, especially for a 42-year-old guy making a comeback after a very long hiatus. And I think overall he just looked phenomenal, man. And I wish I knew he was making a comeback. I didn't hear anything about the fact that he was making a comeback. And I'm a guy that pays attention to this sort of thing. I hadn't heard anything about it. So when I saw that name on the list, I didn't even have him in my predictions because I didn't even realize it was the same guy. This guy hasn't competed in over a decade. But yeah, he looked very good, and he definitely deserved that 3rd place spot. So in 4th, you have Ahmed El Sadani. He looked very impressive as well. In 5th, you had Ahmad, and in 6th, you had Guy Cisternino. So Guy Cisternino was another guy. I didn't know he was competing either. I didn't see him on that list. I did see, I think, a day or two prior, people were tagging him in Indy Pro stuff, and he was hashtagging Indy Pro. So I figured at that point he was doing it. But I think what we saw here was a good Guy Cisternino, but not necessarily a great Guy Cisternino, and that's why he took 6th. So finally, I just wanted to mention I had the opportunity at the end to kind of talk to Steve Kuclo for a little bit. It was really cool to get to meet the guy for a second time. I met him up at the Arnold Classic at the meet and greet there. And then I told him, and we talked a little bit on Instagram, and he said, hey, we should meet up at this Indy Pro. And when we talked at the Indy Pro, we said we want to do some kind of collaboration together, whether that be an interview or whatever ends up happening. So you're definitely going to see something between Steve Kuclo and myself very soon on my channel. I think this guy, I mean, it's definitely a guy that's kind of been off the radar for, a couple of years now, myself included, being a bodybuilding fan. I hadn't had, Steve Kuclo on my radar for a couple of years. But then I think after that Arnold Classic appearance in 2018 where he placed fifth, he would put himself on a lot of people's radars, and he really put himself on the map. Then he comes in and does a pro show right after in this Indy Pro and wins it, in my opinion, kind of an easy win for him. So Steve Kuclo is certainly back on the map, and I'm actually, I'm very excited to see what this guy does. I'm excited to see how he does at the Olympia this year. I think you got to say, he's a favorite to be in the top 10 at this year's Mr. Olympia, possibly even the top 6. I mean, this is a guy where I think a lot of the reason why he placed so highly at the Arnold Classic was the fact that his conditioning was so good. Again, at the Indy Pro, he had really good conditioning. And what's one of the main complaints that we see with guys on the Olympia stage? Conditioning and bubble guts. So Steve Kuclo can come in with this crazy conditioning. I think it's certainly a possibility that he could crack into the top 6. But I think in all likelihood, he's definitely going to be a top 10 contender at the Mr. Olympia this year. And I'm very excited to see what he can do. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below about the results of the 2018 Indy Pro. Thank you guys for watching the video, and please give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Nick Strength and Power, signing out.